Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and basically in this video, what I want to do is I want to explore the strategies and how you would use generative AI to help you be more productive as a web developer. Now, here's the key thing: you need to first learn the skill before generative AI can help you, because if you don't know CSS properties and how to think in CSS or think in HTML, how to think in JavaScript, you can't ask an AI the right questions to get you the results, and nor would you understand the results enough to be able to take it and get you where you need to go. Okay, so there's no shortcut to having to know the stuff. Okay, if you just try to ask AI to kind of compensate for where you lack, you're gonna end up creating a lot of things that don't work. Okay, so bottom line is, like, AI can be really helpful, but you still need to know what you're doing. Okay, so this means you still need to spend the time reading like the documentation to learn what all these different CSS properties do, and learning about different design patterns and whatnot. But the idea is that once you know those things, you can work 10 times faster if you use AI effectively to help you through small bits. Okay, you don't sit there and say to AI and go, make me a website. Okay, because you're not going to get exactly what you want. Okay, but let me show you an example. Let's say we'll just create an AI.html file. Okay, how would I approach this? Okay, so for example, let's say I have a button tag here, and I'm going to give it the class of button. Okay, so I know that I want a class, and I know I want to style this button. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to Google Bard. So it's bard.google.com. And while I do have a ChatGPT account, I'm going to use Google Bard because it's free, so that anyone who's watching this can then, make use of this. Okay, yeah, fine. Use my location. Okay, so what would I do? I'm not going to say, hey, write me CSS for a button. I'm going to be specific. I'm going to say, hey, write me a CSS class. A CSS class called button. Okay, because I already chose the name of the class. And it should create a stylish red button that animates when clicked, or something like that. Okay, yeah. And let's see what it turns out. But the idea is, like, I'm being like descriptive. I'm just saying make me a nice button. Okay, and again, some of this is probably not going to be perfect. So I take a look at this. I'm like, okay, see if I see anything that's kind of like a red flag. Border radius, that's fine. Okay, so then I can literally just copy this over, take a look, see what the results would be. So instead of making a separate CSS file, I'm just going to make a style tag. Okay, and copy those CSS classes over. Okay, and let's take a look at the results. So I go to ai.html, open with live server. Okay, now one problem I'm seeing, well, there's no text on the button, so that should probably fix that. Index.html. No, that's the wrong one. ai.html. And let's actually put some text on the button. Button. Okay, and like, see when I click on the button, you get a nice little effect. Okay, not necessarily like, again, it wasn't very descriptive, so like the style of the button, isn't my favorite. Okay, but let's say I decide I want to use a color palette. Okay, so I might use a website like Coolers to generate a color palette. Okay, that's not Coolers. I think it's an extra O. Coolers. Is that it? Take me to like the normal Google results thing. Where is that website? It's coolers.co. Got it. But this website, you can start, like, create like random color palettes. So let's say we want to use, I'll just first do a couple randoms. Where's the button for regenerating? It's been a while. Oh, here we go. You hit spacebar. Okay, so let's say this is our color palette. So what I would probably want to do is I'm going to copy each of these colors. So saying using the following color palette. Okay, and I'm just going to copy each of these colors so that way it has all the colors. Okay, and I'm going to put the hash in front of them just to make it very clear that these are hex numbers. Okay, write me a class for a stylish button that uses material design principles. Okay, and let's write me a CSS class. So again, you gotta be descriptive. You gotta be deliberate. Okay, and let's see what it comes up with. Okay, it's thinking about it. It's thinking about it. And there we go. So now let's see what happens when we use this button. Okay. Okay, and see, we get a nice, very nice button. Okay, but notice I'm asking it to do a very specific thing and being very detailed about that specific thing. So you're not necessarily saving like a tremendous amount of time because you still got to be really descriptive. But the idea is that you don't necessarily have to like think as hard about like syntax all the time. You can think, but the thing is, if you don't understand the syntax, if you don't understand the code, it's kind of hard to be like descriptive. So now let's see here. Let's say I want to, make a click event on that button. Okay, so then I want to write some JavaScript. So I might say, hey, I want to write me some JavaScript, or some front end, be more specific, front end JavaScript that does the following. Okay, and then what you do is you explain the pseudocode. Okay, so you have to really kind of think through what the steps of what you want to do is. So select the button from the DOM based on the class of button. Then what I want, that's edit. Okay, well, it got started. Let me first this edit that and keep that going. Okay, select button from the DOM based on the class of button. Okay, although I should probably spell class, right? Although it figured it out. Okay, you should then send the user to a random URL. And again, it should add the type of browser they're using to the query string at the end of the URL. Okay, so the idea is that what I expect to be generated, what I'm hoping to get generated, is that it'll, grab the button from the DOM, add an event listener, then it'll maybe create an array of URLs, and then what it'll do is it'll select a random URL from that, and then using the window object, grab the type of browser that the user is using and add that as a query parameter at the end of the URL. That'd be what I'd expect if the AI interprets this correctly. Okay, so let's see if it does that. Okay, and always the cool thing about the AI is it explains what it gives you. So read those explanations, because if you're someone who's learning, then make sure you want to read that as extra much. Okay, but now if I read that, let's see here. This is doing exactly what I thought. Okay, yes, it's grabbing the button. It's using query selector all. That's not the way I would have done it, but that's fine. I see why, because generally a class, many things can have a class, so I might think that I want to grab all the possible buttons. Okay, it is grabbing the browser. So as I said, using technically the navigator object is part of the window object. So it's grabbing the browser that the user is using. Okay, here's a random URL. Not exactly grabbing a random URL. It's still statically coded in there. So again, that's why you need to understand the code, because it's not going to give you something that's perfect, especially when it comes to more like general purpose programming like this. So, I'd still have to go back and edit that so that way it grabs random URLs, but now it's creating the query string, and that's exactly what I expected, adding the browser to a query string. And then it's changing redirecting the user to a URL based on the theoretical random URL and the query string that I specified. And then it's saying, hey, this function runs whenever we click the button. Okay, that is all good. Now, the only issue I have with this is that it doesn't actually give you the line of code where we select the button. So this button variable just magically exists. Okay, so that's the other thing. If I just copied and paste this wouldn't necessarily work because we're assuming that this button variable exists. And the other problem, well, actually, it's declared here. The problem is it doesn't get declared. It gets declared inside the function. So technically, it doesn't exist in this scope. Okay, so you see, like, if I were to just copy and paste this code, I'm going to run into issues. But I know enough that this gives me most of what I need, and I can edit the parts that aren't perfect. Okay, so my point being is that this still is very helpful. Okay, and saving you a lot of time and writing a lot of code that, especially for like more complex things, but it's not going to be perfect. So you still need to understand the code, the syntax enough, one, to be able to ask it good questions, and two, to be able to interpret the output enough to be able to correct the imperfections in the output. Okay, so basically, if you ask it bad questions like, write me CSS for a website, okay, like that's not descriptive enough. Like a website could look in a bajillion different ways. So what it might generate could be not very helpful. So you see, it writes some CSS, okay, but actually, how would you apply this? Whatnot? It's not super helpful. Okay. So detailed, well thought out questions based on an understanding of web development will get you good answers. And even those answers will still not necessarily be 100% perfect. So an understanding of web development, HTML, CSS, is needed to then take those answers and really kind of fix it. Because again, this is not perfect. There's problems with this just because it's just things that like the AI, it doesn't, perfectly understand. So again, this variable here, button, technically doesn't exist because it's declared in the function, not outside of the function. So there's some scoping issues with the way this is written. This is not grabbing a random URL in the way that I intended. So, but these are minor things that I can then just go adjust. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully that gives you an idea of like thinking through how generative AI. And again, there's things that are more specific to code, like GitHub Copilot and whatnot. But like GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT generally are things you have to pay for. Google Bard is something you can access for free. So if you're someone who's just trying to use generative AI in a budget, here you go. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Have a great day and enjoy.